Hello, this is Chris from Team Phoenix. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new there, then welcome. So this video today, I just wanted to talk about what I think is something that's probably been quite overlooked in the Christopher Watts case. It's the note that Chris wrote. Of course, he wrote this on the 6th of August, exactly a week before the murders. And I mean, looked at now in isolation, it shows clear premeditation, and we know since his confessions that he made since that it very much was premeditated murder. He said for a few weeks he'd been thinking about it and planning it ever since his mistress Kessinger told him that she wanted to give him a son. But a lot of people have debated about it, about it, even its authenticity, even if it actually existed. But I just wanted to clear that up today, hopefully, in this video. And this comes directly from Chris's sister, Jamie. This information is coming a conversation that I've had with Jamie. I think it's very, very important that, from a psychological aspect, looking at this tragedy, we try and look for what we can learn from it that can help others. Ultimately, if we can help people that may be in similar situations to any of the characters in this tragic story, then that can only be of benefit, not just to them but to the world of psychology and to humanity, really, and to society. So I thought we'd just take a look at that note, and I can explain to you exactly how that note came about, and why and when it was written. We know it was written on the 6th of August, of course. Well, presumably it was dated 6th of August. But we're just going to go through exactly the circumstances surrounding the writing of the note. So as I say, this is now over 2 years later. We're now, people are still continually talking about this case. And of course, one of the major questions is, in everybody's mind, is just why. Why did Chris Watts do what he did? Why did this seemingly normal, placid, non-confrontational, and certainly on the surface, kind and loving father and husband decide that the best course of action for him to end his marriage and move on with a new life with his mistress, that the best course of action for him was to annihilate his entire family? Of course, it just doesn't make sense on any level. But of course, Chris Watts is a psychologically damaged person, psychologically ill. I think you'd be foolish to think otherwise. He displays clear traits of psychopathy and personality disorders, narcissistic behaviour. So we're going to take a look at that, and also, what was the drive, what was the reason behind him committing this most inhumane of acts. And of course, we know the mistress, it appears, was the main driving force, but just why did he commit this most atrocious of acts? And secondly, and most certainly probably far more important, as I mentioned, is what can we learn from this tragedy? What can we take from it, from the events and circumstances that may help others? Points in the timeline where maybe if other people find themselves in a similar situation, are there red flags there? Are there points there where human intervention, talking, communicating could prevent something similar happening to somebody else? Whether that be a parent whose son-daughter is going through a very stressful situation, and they suddenly are acting irrationally. They want to end their marriage relationship, bam, out of nowhere, and there's been a lot of bad feeling before that. Or to somebody whose husband, a woman whose husband is just all the way around, I suppose, or partners, a partner that's suddenly gone uncharacteristically cold on them and has completely shut them out. Maybe there's real reason there to, dig a lot deeper and, not just hope that things are going to sort themselves out. Maybe people need to confront and try and communicate on a more pressured level, force somebody to talk, to display how they feel. And I think, and when you look at the Watts case, I think one of the most overlooked and detailed pieces of information, certainly in terms of premeditation, is the note that Chris wrote and left for his family on August 6th, which is, of course, exactly a week before the murders. Now, we do know this note was never used by the prosecution. It was never used by the defence. Interestingly, you have to say, you look at it now in isolation, it's a written note of premeditation, isn't it? Now we know what he did, and quite frankly, it's no surprise, is it, when you look at it? After what he's confessed, he said he was planning for weeks to kill his family as soon as Kessinger told him she wanted a son. But it's never been known exactly why Chris wrote that note and the circumstances surround it. A lot of people have hypothesised over it, talked about it. Some people even said the note wasn't real, but the note was indeed actually very, very real. And I can hopefully tell you now that the circumstances surrounding the note, and I'll say this information comes directly from Chris's sister Jamie. This is not speculation on my part, and I just hope that we could maybe help everybody try and learn exactly, just try and understand exactly how this terrible tragedy occurred, and how we can help people. And I certainly know that, of course, Chris's family are just begging to know exactly why Chris did what he did, and what exactly is wrong with him. There's got to be something wrong with him, right? You don't annihilate your family if you're perfectly fit and well. When you look at Chris's obvious lack of empathy, his lack of remorse, his pathological lying, classic signs of a defined personality disorder. Some might say, psychopathy, maybe a sociopath. And we know he was very good at playing a loving husband, a loving father. But ultimately, that simply couldn't be 100% genuine, could it? Because if it was, his family would still be alive. So let's take a look at the note. So I'll say the note was dated the 6th of August. And the note reads, "To whom it may concern, if anyone gets this letter, I would never do anything to hurt myself, or my children, or my wife. If anything happens to me, please investigate my wife, Chris Watts." So of course, instantly we know it's a complete load of lies. Of course, he annihilated his family. He murdered his family, and obviously here he's trying to push things on to Shanann, his wife. It's clear intent here to create blame on Shanann. Back even when he wrote this note, which is interesting because in his confession he almost had to be pushed to involve Shanann in the murders of the children. Here he's saying, "Please investigate my wife." So what exactly he was referring to, if anything happens to me, what exactly he was referring to there, I don't know. But it does show premeditation here, doesn't it? And it does show that he was at that stage trying to shift blame for whatever was going to happen onto his wife. So this was written, as I say, the 6th of August. That's the date on it. And as I say, it was not used by prosecution or defence, this note. So, as I say, this is not speculation. This has come directly from, the information has come from Chris's sister. So we know that in late June of 2018, Shanann took Bella and Cece and she flew out to North Carolina to visit her family and Chris's family. Chris stayed behind in Colorado for the first 5 weeks. He then flew out for the last week on the 31st of July. Of course, he was having a full-blown affair, as we know at that time, with Nicole Kessinger. On July 31st, Chris flew out to North Carolina to join his family. Now, it was when he was in North Carolina that Chris's dad then gets a call from Chris. So Chris calls his dad, Ronnie. Bear in mind, he hadn't spoken to his family for over 4 weeks, around about 4 weeks, maybe a bit more, since the labelled Nutgate incident, which happened on July 9th. Of course, that's when Shanann, felt that Cindy had endangered her daughter's life, Cece's life, by exposing her to nuts that she was highly allergic to. So the last conversation that he had with his family before he spoke to them in North Carolina, when he was in North Carolina, was in the aftermath of that day on July 9th, when I think he called his parents, and I think Shanann was also on the phone with him. Now, in Chris's February 2019 prison interview, he claimed that Shanann told him after that day that he was not allowed to call or talk with his parents. Certainly the children weren't allowed to see his parents ever again. And Chris Watts also added in that interview that his dad to him was his hero, and that he felt like he lost him because he wasn't able to talk with him for those 3 or 4 weeks. Now, of course, that could, just be Chris trying to gain sympathy. It could be him feeling sorry for himself. But it does just offer a little bit of insight into maybe how Chris felt about the whole Nutgate incident. Of course, he didn't really tackle it. He didn't speak much about how he felt about it. Of course, his personality doesn't really let on how he really feels about things. But, the fact that he's saying that just gives you a little bit of insight into maybe how he felt and how that made him built up remorse in his mind towards Shanann for not allowing him to do that. So while in North Carolina, as I say, Chris called his dad Ronnie and told him that he wanted a divorce. He wanted to separate with Shanann. Now, this was a complete bombshell to his family, as they had no clue. Like I say, they hadn't spoken to him for 4 weeks before that. I mean, one thing does come to my mind when I think about Chris speaking with his dad. We know that Chris did actively delete messages between himself and his dad. I know Shanann did mention that Chris was doing that. And certainly during Chris's interview, his initial confession, Ronnie didn't seem surprised when Chris mentioned to his dad, when he was talking to him, when he mentioned that they know about the affair. Ronnie certainly didn't seem surprised by that, or even ask any questions about that, which I found interesting. But after Chris called his dad Ron, his father then called Jamie, Chris's sister, and they all met at Chris's parents' house. So Chris was in North Carolina for a week, the last week of the North Carolina trip, and that's the only time that he could make it to see his parents. So this was August 6th. This was the day before they all flew back to Colorado, the day before Shanann, Chris and the children flew back to Colorado. So they meet up at Chris's parents' house. Chris tells him he wants a divorce. He wants to separate from Shanann. To his family, because of everything that had happened on that North Carolina trip, his family sensed that something wasn't right. They had a bad feeling. Jamie tells me that she had a gut feeling that something was going to happen. Now, of course, they never dreamed that Chris was going to murder his entire family. And, if they could rewind time, that's a day that they would rewind back to, is that day when they were all together and Chris was telling them that he wanted a divorce. They never thought, obviously, anybody was going to get hurt. And they had seen Shanann on edge. She was not herself that trip. Obviously, had the Nutgate incident. I believe there was another argument before that. And then they suddenly find out that Chris is wanting to leave her. Of course, we know that Chris was mentally abusing her, mentally torturing her at that point. Obviously, he was having the affair. He was blanking his wife. He was not there for her, giving her mixed messages. You know, I've no doubt in my mind that Shanann was extremely stressed, probably exhausted and frightened of what was going on. Now, Cindy did press Chris about an affair, but he denied it. All the time he was at their house, as we know, they saw him texting somebody. You know, this is what made them suspicious, particularly Chris's mum. And she did, as I say, called him out on, are you having an affair? But he denied it. Which he did, of course, right up until the confession, as we know. Didn't even, where he claims he did. No, even in his last confession, he didn't, did he? He didn't admit it right up until after the murders, only when he confessed. So, as I say, that's the day that Chris's family wished they could go back to, and I've no doubt that, you know, knowing what was going to happen, they would have forced Chris to talk. You know, forced him to talk about what was going on, how he felt, the circumstances surrounding his marriage, and all of that. And so maybe if we're going to try and learn something from this, then maybe that is a point in the timeline where, say, if you have a son or daughter who's having marital problems, a lot of stress in their life, and they're making rash decisions, like out of nowhere they suddenly want to get a divorce or what have you, and they're acting different, you've got a bad feeling, something's not right, then maybe that's a time where you would need to intercept and maybe force that person to talk, find out what is going through their mind.